fall planting just edges out just about any other season for planting. And that's because the soil is still warm and the plants are heading into dormancy, so they're not actively growing, as opposed to when you plant in the spring, you do have a full growing season ahead of you that may get really, really hot, but and you'll have to keep the plant watered, but it's not usually going to freeze back to the ground. So in the fall, the ground's still fairly warm and the plant's not actively growing, and you can get it in the ground and get it a chance for the roots to establish before things get really, really cold for the winter.
We sometimes think about plants as having, I don't know, a certain kind of intelligence or something like that. Plants actually differentiate between growing and establishing. If you put a new plant in the ground and it needs to establish the roots, that's somehow different than actually for the growing season, where I guess, you're going to produce flowers and things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, if you consider that perspective, putting energy into reproduction, which is what flowers are, is really expensive for a plant. And where they get their energy from is from the roots. So it's really important to make sure the roots have absolutely everything they need. And if that is in place, then the top will be just fine. This is why we actually in the landscape have so much struggle with plants, because often we're having drought, or the plants don't get enough fertilizer, or it's just hot and the top is part of the plant is really struggling. So if you can have the perfect root environment for any plant, the top part has a much better chance of surviving and thriving and doing well. So we can help encourage plants to establish those root systems a little bit better in the fall. Just slightly. I mean, any time is good to plant.
But when we plant in the fall, we have warmer soil, we have cooler climate up top. The roots, go ahead, do your growing. You guys up top, just kind of sit back for a while.
Yeah, just start winding down, enjoy the cool weather, and, don't go crazy. This is why we always say don't fertilize in the fall, especially or after you've recently planted something, because you don't want them to put on a big flush of growth and then boom, we hit a freeze in November or December. And that environmental struggles is often a reason we have for plant failure. And sometimes, very often, and it's things that happened 6 months ago or a year ago. And we don't always remember that, but plants do. They are pretty resilient, but sometimes that's the answer. We had a cold snap in November, and then it warmed back up, and then the plant started actively growing, and then it got cold again overnight, and the next summer they just leaf out, and then their leaves dry up and they can't quite make it again. So sometimes it's just environmental from a long time ago.